And so to bring it to becoming a yoga teacher, was that sort of your transition from the martial arts beginning where it was a little bit more violence to more just the body discipline element?
The yoga found its way into my life through martial arts, obviously, right? So um, for me, that was the real connecting factor into the spirit, right? So like remember I talked about mind, body, spirit, emotions. I'd say the art and expression kind of really covers the emotions, the emotional body. The mind, we can read a bunch of books, you can study things, right? That that can be tackled in basically every area.
You can listen to conscious talks,
Conscious talks,
come on the show.
you should be listening. No, I'm joking. Yeah. And then the physicality obviously is like pretty well covered in martial arts. So, but yoga was initially started for like developing my flexibility.
Hmm.
I had sort of mentors and idols and things and people that I looked up to that were both martial artists and started flirting with yoga. It's kind of pretty common in jujitsu in the jujitsu world, and I was super deep into jujitsu, and um and then that kind of hooked me in itself. I do more yoga now than I do martial arts. So
Hmm.
it was this like if this was my martial arts initially and this was
Hmm.
my yoga, it's completely flipped itself on its head.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I
Hmm.
think it really creates a peaceful vibration for you. I'm wondering, are you a fan of the UFC? Do you have any comments on the growing sport of mixed martial arts?
Yeah, I used to be, I mean, I used to, I loved the UFC. I've been to like so many events. I was so, as a young man, so deep into the UFC. I met a number of athletes and fighters, and it was something I wanted to do. And then I started uncovering the dark side of that business, and it's not a pretty world, and
It's pretty
it's
massive.
ignorant. Yeah, it's ignorant to ignore it.
Hmm.
Is that so? I think there's a part of me that's a bit um fractured because again, when the UFC came onto the market and they were trying to make it mainstream, they were selling it as like, oh, these guys are martial artists, there's respect involved. And then as soon as they had your money and all your attention, it just went WWE, which to me, when you're dealing with like violence and serious consequences, and you start to see the effect short term, I can list a number of names of fighters that I grew up watching that have real problems in their lives. You know, it becomes a little bit less of like it's just more real. It's hard to just be like that's purely a spectacle to enjoy and to gamble on, and that's what it is at this point. So it's a weird question because like I I do still watch it because I study martial arts, right? There's an element of it that's, but it's just not a sport for me. It's like it's a competition that has real consequences, and that's why the respect needs to go along with it. Otherwise, it's just, and then you got a bunch of people watching that, and it's just not healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely agree with the dark side of it, being very present for sure, both in a spiritual sense and a literal sense. I would love for the UFC to maintain the same kind of respect that I feel the hockey usually maintains. You know, this idea of like maybe just start a little hype before the event, but then after the event, they shake hands, they hug,
Code of honor,
yeah,
right?
like there needs to be some kind of understanding of the respect required after the fact, most essentially for me. But
I
I
agree with
will
that.
thank you, and I will say though, I do think it's a necessary part of our culture. Like watching the movie Fight Club and seeing how that movie plays out with the psyche of that main character. I think that's true for our culture as a whole, our culture as a collective. Men need some level of output of some of our more ancient tendencies or aggressive tendencies. So this fantasy of two men getting in the fight and seeing who's stronger, who's tougher, who can win a fight. I think I don't think that's going to get extinguished anytime soon.
I agree. I tried to walk away from it after had some spiritual recognition and realization. And then now I realized that's just a facade and this is ancient. It's not going anywhere. And whether, I need to learn how to accept that in my own way. And
Mm.
I think, yeah, we're at an interesting point in human history, but maybe it's always been this way too, where the only the only option you have is to really develop your own consciousness and act from that consciousness, and help other people maybe realize. And that's why for me, going back into the martial arts world, it's like, okay, I was sold on this thing of respect, martial arts, bowing, all that kind of stuff. And I appreciated it. I was like, oh, that's what I needed at a certain time in my life. And then for that to be kind of stripped away and like it just to be all about views, money, whatever sells. Now going back into the martial arts world and just to teach people and not to like I'm not looking to be on a giant stage. I'm past that kind of like egoic want or desire, but just from a internal place of it feels good to be able to shape somebody's life in a positive way. And martial arts is great for that. The Karate Kid, it's always that's
Yeah,
still real.
absolutely, 100%.